behalf of the Policy Committee for PSRC 2024-25, this is our first meeting. I'd like to call to order 9 a.m. here in the boardroom, PSRC boardroom. Like to thank each and every one for participating, and from the way it looks, I may have by way of virtual or audio is Miss Melissa Oceans, board member, principal Miss Angela Faulkner, board member Mr. Terry Locklear. Is there anybody, and also principal Mr. Christopher Suggs, anybody else that I may be missing? Okay, at this time, I'd like to start off by asking Mr. Craig Lowry to do the invocation.
Let us pray. Gracious Father, we come to you at this time and thanking you for just allowing us to be here, and thank you for waking us up again. We thank you for your blessings each and every day that we are so not worthy of, but we're thankful that we do get those blessings from you. We now ask your blessings upon this meeting, that the things we say and do are for the betterment of the PSRC family. These things we ask in thy name. Amen.
Amen. Our topic today, start off by adoption of the agenda. I hear a motion that we'll adopt the agenda. Second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Okay, we'll go with the agenda as planned. Policy today looks like is 1725, 4035, 32, 7236. In the way of this policy, its title is Sexual Harassment Prohibited Conduct and Reporting Process. And please help me, Ms. Attorney. I understand the General Assembly had some general statute changes which triggered this policy, and asked DPI to come back and for us to revisit to make sure we stay within the general statutes. You have anything to comment on that?
So that was only for policy 1510, school safety, has to do with. Can you guys hear me? So policy 1510, school safety, the update with that stems from a new session law and a provision in that session law. The other policies that are listed are from the new Title IX regulations.
Okay.
Mackenzie, and if you will, please, those federal guidelines, Title IX, if you give us a quick overview of what's going on, where it is in terms of being able to roll that policy out. I know that in some states it's being challenged, but can you bring us up to speed on all that and really to focus up Title IX policies?
Sure. So briefly, it expands the definition of what discrimination includes. So it includes sex-based harassment as well as sex-based discrimination now, and includes pregnancy and things like that. And it also goes to a single model investigator. So there's only one investigator now, instead of you having multiple people involved in the process. So those are the two biggest changes with these new Title IX regulations.
Okay, and before we get too far into the subject, I'm gonna ask Mr. Bob, if you will. We've asked for clarification on identifying suggested changes within policy, whether we're looking at highlighted wording, such as the highlighted red in policies, and also marks lines into all the wording. There's different encryptions codes that we have to follow. I'm gonna let him give us an update on that.
So good morning. I've reached out to the School Board Association, because they are responsible for writing our policies, to ask them to give me an update on this. So anything in red, we know that that's going to be a change or is something new to the policies. anything that is, I'm gonna call it, struck through is something that we're gonna take out. And I do know, not in this particular version, but in the past, we have received updates that are in blue as well. So I'm waiting to hear back from them on what those blue updates mean, if there's any difference in the blue and the red.
And Bobby, so if you'll notice, it is a total rewrite on policy 1725.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is a new policy in the back, and that's where we'll spend our time on that new policy.
Yes, correct. So as Mackenzie's pointed out, that based upon the new Title IX regulations, we need to rescind policies 1725, 1726, and also 7232,
Okay?
with 17 to 25 being again a total rewrite.
So, Mr. Chair, can we get a motion to rescind our original policy 1725, 4035, and 7236, please?
I hear such motion. Okay, we have a motion to rescind policy 1725, 4035, 7236, back to state standards. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
For the record, we have 4 ayes. Those opposed? No opposes, so carried. Also, I failed to mention that our policy committee consists of Ms. Melissa Oceans, Craig Lowry, Terry Locklear, Mr. Bradley Phillips. Those members can vote, and I want everyone to know that anybody can participate as far as making any suggestions or comments, whether it be superintendent, staff members, principals, teachers, or whomever. Okay, we've taken care of that first policy. We'll move on to school safety policy, 1510, 4200, 7270.
Mr. Chairman, Bobby, help me, please. We need to take the same action on 1726, 4036, and 7237.
Yes, sir. Which one is,
The next.
is that the next? Did I skip one?
Mhm. Title IX, sexual harassment and grievance procedures.
Yes, I'm sorry, I did skip that one. Okay, we need,
So I think typically the superintendent has, are you talking about the regulation? It's on. Okay. Were you talking about the regulation?
Yes. that
So
was-
typically, the superintendent has the authority to make changes to regulations without it being approved by the board.
Right.
So there wouldn't need to be a motion on that. You could just,
But we
you can-
can, but we can, right, just as a matter of record.
you can, yeah,
Historical.
sure.
So if we can take action.
you'd like to take?
Yes, just matter of record.
By request of Superintendent Dr. Williamson, we will take action on policy 7232. He has discretion according to our attorney to write discrimination and harassment in the workplace policy. Do I have a motion for such action?
Sorry, can I clarify?
Because I was looking at something else when you said it.
So the motion should be to rescind policy
Policy
1726, 4036, and 7237, to rescind
Yes.
that policy.
So we are talking about the regulation.
Yes.
correct?
I'm sorry.
No worries. So I think someone was talking about 7232. That was already included in the first motion.
That's
So
correct.
for this one, we're solely talking about the regulation, which is 1725/4035/7236R, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. All right,
yes,
proceed.
that's correct. We have a motion to accept, to give superintendent clarification or authority to upgrade to policies 72, 20, 17, 25, 40, 35, 72, 36 are sexual harassment definitions and grievances. Authority, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes carried. Okay, our next policy, and help me not miss one. School safety, 1510, 4200, 7270. Page 1 of 3. Help me out, Mr. Bobby. It looks like there's no recommended changes on that page.
Correct.
Page 2 of 3, no recommended changes. Page 3, training. Looks like we've taken out for staff and students. And it must be, training must be provided annually for stakeholders, including, and then it gives clarification on who they are. Any discussion on that?
Mr. Henry.
You're on.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to that other in a minute, but I got a question on page 1 of 3 under school safety. And, I'm not saying it's something to do today, but it come up to me last year. Go under B and I'll give you the example. C where it says safety of school buildings and grounds, and Mr. Bobby and I had a discussion on this. Making sure I got the right place. Yeah. Under B, the first one, school administrators shall strictly enforce policies 50-15, school volunteers, and 50-20 visitors to schools. And the question was visitors to schools. And here's what happened last year and what I ran into. Visitors come into school, and in particular, Grandparents' Day. And this is what come back and got thrown in my face. We have Grandparents' Day. They come out to school and everything, which is all fine. Okay. Grandparents working. They can't come that day. They come back and said, I went to school, called. I don't know if they did or not. They wanted to go have lunch with their child, granddaughter, and who was 6, 7 years old. Okay. They were told no, they couldn't. And from what I can gather, I started asking principals, this is something it's not consistent with us in the county. We got school A that says, yes, come on out here. You can have lunch with your grandchild. School B says, no, you can't. Now, we got here, it's a discretion of principals, and if they can do that, and I know when we had COVID, we pretty much stopped all that. And I'm not saying change it now, but I do think it needs to be looked at to where there's a consistency, because I know, unless I'm fooled, if they can't make it this year on Grandparents' Day, they're going to give me a call again. I said, I thought you was going to check on that. So I'm checking on it now. And I will say, from being a principal to being a grandparent, my view of it might be changed a little bit. Now, let me add this. One of the complaints from the schools, well, I got people that come out here and then they're going to go all over campus and we can't keep up with them. And I don't know, where they're at on campus. And I understand that. So discussion or think about later on, we don't have to change it now, but my biggest concern is when, this school says yes and this school says no, and folks are going to talk, and then it puts us kind of in the middle as far as what we should do. That's it.
Okay, good point. I think that would fall back to Dr. Williamson as far as making sure, Mr. Craig, that we have unification across the board with all principals and all schools. if we're administering the same,
Long as it's,
Same
as long
practice.
as it's consistent.
right, consistency, and I agree.
I think we have a principals meeting scheduled for when? The 19th, and I'll make sure that's part of our conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And can you give this policy committee, Dr. Williamson, some insight on your thinking on how that should be handled?
Yeah, we do allow volunteers. Grandparents' Day is normally when we like, because we do like to limit disruption, not saying parents and buildings is a disruption, but we have to guard against instructional time. But as volunteers, if we have that form, and then my practice always been is, yes, but you can't show up every week and you can't, right? But you do have a right to come in, just schedule that. But we'll clarify all of that.
And I think it was mainly like at lunch. It was not coming into classroom.
Right.
Yeah. But,
Right. But we'll clarify that. That is,
Good point. Any other comments? Okay, let's move on. We're on page 3 of 3. Training must be provided annually. And also it's identifying the stakeholders and reporting threats or school to the school population or community. Any comments on that?
And so, Mr. Brewer, the whole revisions in 1510, excuse me, are going back to, I think Mackenzie alluded to this earlier, the budget bill, and that we must have an anonymous tip line for students, and we are currently, excuse me, working on that, but ours is see something, say something. And so we're identifying the appropriate staff and how to push that training out to staff and students.
Thank you.
and Mr. Chair, I would add to that, as part of our leadership back to school meeting, we did have training on Title IX and school safety. And so we met that requirement of the policy, and we asked our principals to go back to the buildings and do the same thing and have that training. So we've gotten all that done this year.
With that being said, can I get a motion from the policy committee that we accept the upgrades and the information that's already shared through and by our superintendent and staff to our staff?
I make a motion, we accept the policy 1510, 4200, and 7270.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it. We'll move on to policy 1710, 4020, 7230. Discrimination and harassment prohibited by federal law. Page 1 of 2. Like we have quite a bit of changes here. Clarification in all operations and board prohibits discrimination based on race, sex, origin, religion, disabilities, military, so on. Questions on page 1 of 2? Not page 2 of 2. Not page 3 of 2. We'll move on to page 4 of 2. Reporting discrimination and harassment. Looks like we've added additional pages on page 5 of 2. Addressing complaints. I'm moving too fast, let me know. Page 6 of 2. Page 7 of 2. Goes to the superintendent on page 8 of 2. Some modifications on training and programs on page 9 of 2. I like we've already addressed that. Superintendent has. Page 10 of 2.
Yeah,
I'm sure, who will those people be at the bottom?
right. So, Mr. Chair, if I can, we've updated our website. And we probably need to make some changes to this, but the list you have here is not correct. Our website shows Mr. Dale Hawks as 504, Jamie Lowry as ADA, Jamal Campbell as age discrimination, and non-discrimination will be myself.
At page 10 of 2.
Yes, sir. So,
Okay.
so anytime there's a change in contact, we don't have to bring that before the policy committee, but we will make those changes to staff.
Okay. That would include Mr. Dale Hawks, Ms. LaTanya Burney,
Yes.
and Miss Melissa Thompson.
I would go ahead and change those names within the policy. So,
It's updated in the policy
It is.
online.
but not
Not in this copy.
not in this
Not in
copy.
this copy, no.
Okay, so whatever the motion is today to approve the changes, I would recommend that those changes include the appropriate and correct names in the policy that we have.
So with that, Mr. Brewer, ADA will now go to Dr. Carr.
Which one?
ADA B.
A and B. And C would go to,
Mr. Campbell, Jamal Campbell.
and yours,
Mr. Dale still A?
That's correct.
Yes,
Okay.
and Mr. Bobby's would stay the same.
yes, sir.
Okay, page 11 of 2. And it's mostly the legal references. And 12 of 2. Any more discussion on this policy? At this time, do I hear a motion to accept with the necessary changes? It's already in our policy through and by our school website.
I make a motion, we accept policy 1720, 4030, 7235. Do I need to add those names, Ms. McKenzie? We okay since it's on the website?
So, no, I would, your motion can just include to accept the changes recommended by the school board, and then you can include revisions to section I, A, B, and C.
I'll try to remember all that.
Okay, I'll help you.
I make a motion, we accept policy 1710, 4020, and 7230 with revisions in section I of letter A. Ms. Dr. Wendy Dorsey Carr assuming that role. And I'm sorry, Mr. Dale Hawks is still in A. And B is Dr. Wendy Dorsey Carr, and C would be Mr. Jamal Campbell.
I'll second that.
All those in favor of the recommended changes, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it. Well, no further discussion. We'll move on to policy 9, non-discrimination on the basis of sex. Page 1 of 2.
And so, Mr. Brewer, if I can add this change as well, it's updated on our policy, but Dr. Carr is going to assume the role of Title IX coordinator. But that is updated on our policy online.
Okay, that would be section A. Email address would be Dr. Carr.
Yes, sir.
Okay, page 2 of 2. No discussion. Page 3 of 2.
I have a quick question, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Locklear.
Do we have to actually name names within the policy, or can we just list positions?
From what I'm seeing, Mr. Terry, looks like it's given an email address. And
You have to list the name.
And the name.
okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the attorney.
You have to list the names specifically.
Cause it's a title, Mr. Terry. And also email addresses are specific in reference.
Every time there's a position change, will we have to have a policy meeting, or can we just update that without having to have a meeting?
No, Mr. Terry, from my understanding that if there's a position change, all we do is contact the school board association and make that change, because the substance of the policy's not changing, just the contact person will change.
Okay, thank you.
It's not changing content. Just a reference. Page 2 of 2. Page 3 of 2. Page 4 of 2. No more discussion on non-discrimination on the basis of sex. Do I hear a motion to accept policy 1720, 4030, 7235 with recommended name changes? No. Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Policy 1725, 4035, 7236, sex discrimination, prohibited conduct, and grievance procedures. Pages 1 of 2, looks like no recommended changes. Any discussion?
And just a reminder, Mr. Brewer, this is a complete rewrite. So 1725 is going to be everything you see here is brand new.
Okay.
Mackenzie, any conversation, please, have with us on this policy?
I would just say that, so this policy is new and it supersedes policy 1725, which was Title IX sexual harassment, prohibited conduct and reporting process, as well as the regulation that accompanies that. And then 1726, Title IX sexual harassment grievance process. And then it's designed to comply with the new Title IX regulations.
Mr. Henry. Mr. Henry.
Mr. Craig?
Mr. Bobby, let me ask a question now. All right. So 1725, everything here is completely new.
Yes, sir.
So they write it in black. Now, where it's written in red with no strike through, that's where they've changed an existing policy.
Yes,
So that's the difference between the two, just so we're clear.
yes.
Okay. And all of these, Ms. McKenzie, by approving these today, we will be up to date with the Title IX as it is right now,
Correct.
knowing that could change next week again. Possibly, okay.
Good point, Mr. Craig. Any other comments or discussion? Someone entertain a motion to accept policy.
I make a motion to accept policies 1725, 4035, and 7236.
We have a second. All those in favor, but let it be known by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Policy carries.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and this is for Mackenzie or Dr. Cole, any violation of a federal policy could put our federal funding at risk. Is that correct, Mackenzie? Can you talk about that, or Dr. Cole?
I would have to get more information about it and look into it further.
Sorry, Dr. Carr.
From what we understand, it could affect federal funding, specifically certain funding sources that help us support student needs. Just like our Title IX, when we do the civil rights audit and those types of audits where they check how we're serving our students, so that it could impact potentially.
Is that on a school-wide, or is that on an individual basis, or?
If it's funding, it would be district-wide, it would be impacted. So for violating those regulations, it could be a district-wide impact.
Okay. Policy 4023, 7233, pregnant and parenting students and employees. Page 101. Any discussion? Page 2 of 2, 2 of 1. Page 3 of 1. Employees. Dr. Williamson, breast time to express milk, employees, section B2. I understand we've identified, a private area for, staff members to, complete this process. Is that correct?
That's correct. That should be the case in every building.
And that also, I would guess, would, be worked out between the principal and the employee.
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion on that? Okay,
I do want to have a short conversation around our student mothers, how we keep them connected to their education, and what provisions that we make. That Dr. Carr, maybe you or Ms. Holt there.
So when we have a student that is pregnant, they do go on homebound services, and then we facilitate them coming back from homebound back into the school for whatever needs that they need for themselves and the children. And we work with that individualized for each one of those students, because it could be different for what they need and how long that they're required to stay out versus what we see with our staff. So it's just different with children. We do that on an individualized basis.
Great. Any other comments or questions on policy 4023, 7233? All those, and entertain a motion to accept policy as written.
I make a motion to accept 4023, 7233 as written.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Ayes have it. Policies, we'll move on to policy 7329, 7311, bullying and harassing behavior prohibited. Page 1 of 2. Dr. Williamson, I've heard a lot of comments around this particular policy in the last couple of years. My question to you is, our teachers get some type of training in identifying bullying behavior? Or is this expected within the qualification of the teacher?
It's my understanding that we do provide the data, we do provide clarifications on definitions, and that's always a struggle. What we get is everything is bullying, and that is not the case. A lot of it is just harassment with that, but we do provide clarification on those definitions and training. Bobby, Jadelle, you want to add anything to that?
With the required training that teachers get every year, 6 hours for the new teachers, 2 hours for the returning teachers, it doesn't specifically lay out bullying and harassment, but it does talk about it in youth mental health. It talks about the definition of bullying and harassment in that. So they get kind of like a little introduction to what that is and the definition of bullying and harassment in that youth mental health training each year.
And that includes the principal also?
Yes, sir. It's all employees.
Okay.
Mr. Henry,
Mr. Craig?
if I may add, just, we have to at the school level, and I'm sure people do, take all of this serious. Because, some kid comes up and says, well, they're bullying me, and sometime you might, well, I don't know if they are, but because of situations now, I think we need to definitely, I don't know if it's an investigation, but look in every case seriously, is there a problem here? Or is it harassment? What is it? And saying, Dr. Williamson, with what y'all doing, that is providing the training for that. Now, I'm missing something. If you would, turn to page 4 of 2 in that section, 4329 and 7311. D, this is all through here, and it bothered me when I was looking. Well, it didn't bother me. I just wondered, what's the reason for this age 40 or older? I know it's something with
For
regular.
age discrimination.
That's age discrimination
That's
if
correct.
it's 40 or older.
That's correct.
So I'm one that could be discriminated against.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
In terms of employment and
Whatever.
assignments there.
Okay.
I do want to go back and straight to your point, and I really ask Mackenzie if you, from your law firm, the definition, bullying, as we clarified, is an intent to do harm, whereas intimidation is just that. Harassment is more of an intimidation, and then over a extended period of time. Can you add some clarification on that, Mackenzie, please?
Sure. So I think it's helpful if you go to page 2 of 8. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So if you go to page 2 of 8 of this policy, section B1, it gives you a definition of what bullying is. So like Dr. Williamson is saying, bullying is deliberate conduct intended to harm another person or a group of persons. And then if you read through it, it kind of explains it more in depth. And if you go to number 2, it defines harassing behavior, which is conduct that is intimidating, hostile, or abusive, or is unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature.
And then, Bobby, I do want to clarify back to a point that's been made. We do take harassment and bullying serious. We do investigate every complaint. We cannot at times report back to what we research and find on Privacy Act of students. But talk about that. We do take it serious and we do investigate everything.
So a lot, a lot of our conversation with our administrators is about bullying and the fact that it must be repeated. Just because you have an isolated incident of one kid saying something to another kid, that's not necessarily bullying, but our principals do take it very seriously. And what they try to look for is that pattern and see whether or not it's repeated over and over and over. But we do take all acts of bullying very seriously.
Mr. Bobby, what is the requirement on behalf of principals? If there's a situation or occurrence that may arrive at a school, how far is that principal required to carry that matter?
So again, as Dr. Williamson stated, we, as part of our duty to protect students' privacy. So whenever there is an investigation, the principal, I would say 10 out of 10 times lets the parent know that they have investigated it. But in terms of disclosing any punishment that happens to the other student or other students, that doesn't happen.
Okay. Is it required by principals to report that to the central office?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other discussion or comments?
Ms. Ocean.
Okay. So I guess my question, Mr. Bobby, would be, why would a bullying, an act of bullying have to be repeated? Like, why would it have to be something that's being done consistently to a child? With me having a child in the 6th grade, where things like are becoming like more prevalent than lower grades, I don't feel like it should have to be something consistent or something happening. If a child feels like it could be something that happened consistently throughout that day, which I'm thinking we're looking at as one incident, I don't feel like it should have to be something that happens to them every day. That's kind of traumatizing for a child, in my opinion.
Right. So it doesn't have to be spread out over time. It could be that you have several acts of bullying in one day. The issue is it just has to be repeated. It has to be a repeated behavior, not just one isolated incident.
Okay, thank you.
So, Ms. Ocean, and again, that's part of clarification on the definition. 90% of what we get reported as bullying is really just harassment. Because unless it continues over an extended period of time, that at some point there is a real threat. And so we deal more with the harassment definition side of that than the bullying. Very seldom does it really get to bullying.
Okay, so what is our stance on harassment? Shouldn't it be just as strong as it is on bullying? Because harassment and bullying, harassment is still a form of threatening and putting that child in a situation where they shouldn't have to be. So what is our stance on harassment?
I'm sorry. So both of those behaviors are addressed in our discipline matrix. We address bullying as a separate incident with that definition of being repeated. And we also have a harassment definition, as Dr. Winston stated, that addresses threatening behavior. So we address them separately in our discipline matrix.
Okay, and do we have a zero tolerance policy for both?
No, we do not have any zero tolerance policies.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? We'll move to page 3 of 2. We just covered the 40 or older. Page 4 of 2. Page 5 of 2. Page 6 of 2. Got one question as a follow-up, Mr. Bobby. If you have a situation, that may be considered above and beyond in bullying or harassment, is there a period of time that you may involve, SRO?
Yes, so anytime we feel that, anytime there's a situation where a student makes that obvious physical threat toward another student, whether it be online or in person, then we do involve our SRO in that. But again, that involvement with the SRO too would depend upon the age of the student
And
as
that-
well, the consequences that could be faced with the SRO.
And that SRO would, and the sheriff's department would determine whether it would go further.
Yes,
So it would be out of our hands at that
right.
time.
So we could discipline if it fell within our discipline matrix, but then anything outside of law, anything dealing with law enforcement would be determined upon the department and what charges they would file.
And then, Bobby, what we find is a lot of those issues that show up in the buildings, whether it's harassment or bullying, really had its origin in the community.
in the community.
So it comes from the communities to our buildings that shows up that way. And when that's the case, in most cases, we do involve law enforcement because there's a whole lot more involved.
Great point.
Mr. Henry?
Mr. Craig?
Dr. Williamson, I'm gonna add, when we have the county fair, that goes directly to that. We have issues at the high schools after that fair is over with. Mr. Bobby, can you ballpark, because a lot of this year we're talking about is taking care of the school, harassment, bullying. Ballpark, how many of those got down here to your office last year? What do we, because most of it I know is taken care of at school. Any idea?
No, because everything that came to me was able to, the principal had already thoroughly investigated it at the school level.
And I don't think can't remember of having maybe one or two grievance cases that dealt with bullying and harassment last year. I can offhand remember one. So they didn't get to that point. So it's being taken care of hopefully at school. And as long as they continue to do that.
Any other discussion or comments? Any of our staff have any concerns? I hear a motion to approve policy 4329, 7311.
I make a motion to approve 4329 and 7311.
I'll second.
Approved by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Phillips. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. We'll move on to policy minor changes. Policy 1300, governing principle, parental involvement. Page 1 of 2. Let's see. Looks like that may be a title change.
Yes, sir, Mr. Brewer. All of these first ones, 1300, 1500, 1600, and 1700, all just update the references back to previous policies or policies that we're updating today.
Can we incorporate a motion to accept these changes as listed on policy 1300, 1500, and 1700?
1,600 as well.
1600 and 1700.
So we can, Ms. McKenzie,
Yes, you can for all of
come
those.
together.
Because they're,
Okay.
the modifications are basically in the same manner.
Okay, I make a motion, we accept policy 1300, 1500, 1600, and 1700 as written. Let's see if I get 16.
Motion by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Phillips. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Policy carried. Policy 1742, 5060, responding to complaints. Any discussion or comments? Page 1 of 2.
It looks like that's also just updating the policy names.
Okay. Page 2 of 2, looks like cross-reference is the same. Any discussion on policy 1742, 5060? Hear a motion to accept.
I make a motion to accept 1742 and 5060 as written.
Motion by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Phillips to accept responding to complaints policy 1742, 5060 with changes to all references. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Go down to the bottom.
I'm sorry. Repeat. Ayes have it. Policy 1760, 7280, prohibition against retaliation.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we do want to encourage everyone, our employees, our parents, to report any concerns and any issues that they may have. And I want to go on record that we do not retaliate for reporting. We investigate that. So I do want to encourage everyone, you don't have any fear against reporting what we need to know so that we can investigate. So please be clear on that. There's retaliation, and if that happens, if they'll let me know, we will investigate that. But again, I want to encourage all our employees, parents, and everyone, if you see something, please report it.
Thank you. I think that's a great comment in the behalf that, we all don't think alike, and if we all bring up different ideas, we reach areas on all parameters, and as a group, we make the best decisions for our students and staff. No further comments. Looks like changes for policy 1760, 7280 is cross-reference information. I hear a motion to accept policy, prohibition against retaliation.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Craig to accept policy. All those in favor, let it know by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Policy 2500, hearing before the board. On page 101, it looks like it's a cross-reference change. Any discussion or comments on this policy?
So I want to point out that on the PLS update chart, it says option A and option B. It looks like you guys have in your packet option A, which is it provides more flexibility to the board, and option B is more prescriptive in the procedures that the board would use for hearings before it. So A is selected, which is either option's fine, but I just want to point that out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments or discussion? I hear a motion to accept policy 2500A,
Yep. Option A.
option A.
I make a motion to accept 2500 policy option A.
Motion made by Mr. Craig to accept policy 2500, option A, seconded by Mr. Phillips. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Policy 4040, 7310, staff student retaliation. Page 104. I see no red markings here, Mr. Bobby, except, down to page 4 or 5, which is, cross-reference. Is this this is not a new policy. This policy is the previous policy. It's just a cross-reference change recommended for this policy.
Yes.
I think you can group the next three together because they're all updates to the references.
Okay. What is the pleasure of the committee in including all three and identifying those policies as just cross-reference changes and approving all in one process? Any comments? No comments. I'll take the lead to incorporate policies, staff student retaliation 4040, 7310, employee use of social media, policy 7335, policy personnel files 7820.
I think that's the last one.
That's it.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to accept policy changes 4040, 3710, policy 7335, policy 78.
Second. Second.
Motion to accept these three policies due to cross-reference changes. Motion made by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Craig. Those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
Mr. Henry, can
Mr. Craig.
I just add ever how Dr. Williamson, Mr. Bobby does it with social media use, especially with new employees, discussions about Facebook can get you in trouble. And, our older folks ought to know it, but especially with new people, that you need to be careful with it. And it's just me personally, we don't need to be putting school news on Facebook. That's just me.
Mr. Campbell, can you talk about new teachers training and that part of the training, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good morning. Well, part of our new teachers orientation, we cover that as well. And then our principals usually in their open day agenda provide a policy update to remind teachers and staff of acceptable use for social media.
Mr. Campbell, with that being said, what is the discipline practice for teachers or staff members that are maybe involved with social media during school working hours?
That is a building-based decision, action. So principals usually set up expectations of what is acceptable in their building, and they usually address that. If it was a repeated behavior, then they can be referred to my office from there. But so far, I have not received any repeated behaviors of that since I've been at central office.
Okay. Dr. Williamson, any comment? I hear a motion to accept. Let's see, well, we've already voted on policy. Okay, moving on to policy. That's it.
That's it. That's it, brother.
That looks like that concurs
Good job.
our policies to be looked at, reviewed today by our board. As a further future action, I will submit to our board members, our total board membership next Tuesday night. The recommendation from this policy that we will recommend approval of all of these board policies that has been discussed here today. Any other comments? Mr.
Henry.
Craig?
I got a question, and it's not here at all with policy, Mr. Bobby or Dr. Williamson. It's dealing with we've talked about Title IX with the new multipurpose buildings at Sweat and St. Paul's. Now, knowing a little bit about Sweat as far as what they actually have there now. And we've said these are for female and male student athletes. So I'm gonna just take during the day at Sweat. Are we expecting, and is it being, or will it be shared with Mr. Clyde and the coaches, that females and males are in there during the day? Because at Sweat, you got one room that females has been in, which is small, and then we got the other one, field house that's there. So just talk to me a little bit about what's going to be shared, about how that's going to be used.
So we've communicated with both principals that beginning in January, they should have scheduled classes that address the total student population in both of those buildings.
The other one, facilities could be used, but they both have to have opportunity
Yes,
at various times. Okay.
that is not going to be, it's not for after school hours. It's not going to be dedicated to one particular program, athletic program at the school. Every athletic program must have access to the building.
That includes St. Paul's High.
Yes,
new
we've
facility
yes,
also.
yeah, we've communicated that with both principals. Number one being, come January, you should have classes, scheduled in those buildings. And number two, that's going to be equal access for all sports.
And I appreciate you, Mr. Craig, raising that point. Again, the fund source of those buildings is federal money, ESSER funds, which require that. So thank you for raising that point.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, just to prove a point, Mr. Craig. Our plan is to go first and second period, have female weight training, and third and fourth period have male weight training. So that way they are separated, but everybody will have access to use the new facility.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us also, Mr. Burton, Barton, I'm sorry.
No, that's Ms. Suggs.
Yeah, and also I see Mr. Anthony Barton has joined us too. It was brought to my attention that we would wanted some discussion, and it doesn't involve policy. It's been brought to my attention around pre-K admission, staggered enrollment, and the types of flags that's represented in our school. And from talking to Superintendent Williamson, that will be a discussion that our school board will discuss in closed session.
If it becomes personnel.
Right.
On the pre-K practice, we can talk about that now. That's our intent with that, the failure that not everybody communicated that out, please.
So region,
And kindergarten,
Mhm.
and really kindergarten.
Mhm. So we shared last year that we would move to no staggered entry for this school year. What we found out is it was not communicated in all buildings to everybody. So this year we sent out an email and asked each school to decide if they were going to do staggered or not. And that next year we would work on looking at what that would look like for the upcoming school year. So this year, each school building had a choice to do staggered or not do staggered.
And
But-
again, these are open session
Sessions.
topics, right? Open session topics, not for policy
Right,
committee, just to be
right.
clear.
So historically, the staggered kindergarten is probably 10 years old or older. And the reason that came about because classes were large and they really needed to split. That is not our case. Our classes are small.
Our classes are small and no longer are those assessments required. That
Right.
used to be part of kindergarten entry. Now those assessments are things that take all month that people have to observe. So it's not as it was traditionally where people would have to do one-on-one testing with children. And that was usually the huge part of the staggered entries to allow teachers to have that opportunity to work with those kids one-on-one to get those assessments completed.
Mr. Bradley?
Hey, so have we received any feedback for this year so far on that option?
We have some schools that chose to not do staggered entry again, and then some that did. So it varied from building to building.
Mr. Craig?
Will they have the option next year, or that's something we're gonna look at and communicate it so everybody knows?
During the course of this year, we have a conversation with principals after they have a conversation. The truth is, it doesn't create any heartburn either way.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of parents bring their child the first day. And so when you factor in all of that,
Yeah.
that's what led us to the conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah. But we're happy to make sure if we communicate that, it'll be early and that is everybody. But again, most parents, kids show up the first day and our classes are extremely small.
Mhm.
Okay, we don't want to get too far off.
Yeah. I'm
Understand.
gonna cut you guys off.
This was a call meeting for policy.
Right.
But I did want to bring out those high points because it's been brought to my attention. At this time, if we have no further discussion on policies, I'm going to adjourn meeting. Thank you.
You need a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn the policy.
Second.
committee.
Second.
Policy to adjourn by Mr. Craig, seconded by Mr. Suggs. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you and have a great day.